We've reached that time of the season, everybody. We've reached the moment you were all waiting for, or the moment that you were all dreading. But before we jump into it, you can see that I am not alone on this video. I am joined with Oxford United aficionado, mastermind, and the cheapest person I could find because he is a family member. Robert, how are you?
I'm actually paying Ian to be here. That's how cheap I am.
That's it. That is it. That's what I like to hear. But Robert, just quickly before we jump into this, you know your favourite scene from GoldenEye? Not the one with Honor Top and Bond in the sauna, because that's my favourite scene. You know the one where he dives off the cliff, gets in the plane, and the plane's just about to crash into the cliff, and he pulls it up at the last second.
Yeah, what's your point?
Oh, no point. I just thought it was a good scene. That's all.
I see. It's going to be one of those videos, is it?
That's right, everybody. It is going to be that type of video, and welcome to the review of the Oxford United season 2022-2023, a tale that will run you through the full gambit of emotions. It's obviously a season, to put it mildly, which didn't go the way we all hoped, but we will run over it in detail, everything what happened, everything where we think went wrong, why it went wrong. I know it's been done to death on this channel and on every other Oxford United media thing you can find, but we're going to have the final definitive viewpoint on absolutely everything. It's probably going to be a really long video, and I may have to break it down into different parts, so feel free to come back to it, watch little snippets every now and again. I will put timestamps down below so you can jump to certain little bits if you want to. But if you do that, the very least you can do is hit that like button, because that helps me out so much. And also, if you like the content, then think about subscribing. I'm on a march, a steady march towards 800 subs, and you can help me get there by supporting this video. But I've stalled for time long enough. It's long enough for you guys to have gone and got snacks or whatever you want to do, because let's jump in to looking at this Oxford United season, and we're going to take you back to the very start of it, starting with and cast your mind back to a
Brighter time.
end of April 2022, where yourself and I went and watched a meaningless end of season game between Oxford United and Doncaster Rovers, which ended in a 1-1 draw. And do you remember what? Obviously, it was a season that didn't go to, we didn't get what we wanted in terms of playoff, but it was an enjoyable, fun ride of a season, which we fought to get into the playoffs or promotion all the way through it, and just fell down at the end. But do you remember what you were thinking at the end of that season, before, at the close season then? Do you remember like what your mood was about the club or anything like that?
Well, I think we said previously that, as we were walking back to the car, we were saying that there were a lot of flaws that needed to be addressed. Our team at the time was free-flowing. It scored plenty of goals. It was fun to watch. However, we shipped too many goals to make us truly competitive, and we had certain areas we needed to tighten up. We need to become a bit more defensive, maybe get a defensive midfielder in there, certainly get some more bodies in midfield. We did get some freshen up front as well, get some more resources up there. But by and large, it was more of a case of like tinkering rather than major surgery being required.
Yeah, but I remember just in general, the feeling and the vibe around Oxford United was a very positive one. There was some unhappy people at the fact that we hadn't got into the playoffs again, and there was some murmurings around Robinson's position, but largely I would say he was a very supported manager at that time, and I don't think there were many people, and I know I'm was more of a Robinson fan than you, but I don't think there were many people that were like thinking that there should be a change or anything like that. I think we kind of we were quite happy for him to have another go into this season to try again. And I think it was important. The reason why I've done that is just to kind of highlights how bad things have gone in a way when we get through to it, in terms of like how much Oxford United was in a good place, and in a good place with the fans. That we'd had news of like moving to the new stadium at Stratfield Break, and everything, despite the fact that we didn't get in the playoffs, everything did feel rather positive going from the end of last season and looking into this one. And you touched on transfers, and you were wise to do that, because that is probably one of the biggest bones of contention around it. Karl Robinson talked about strengthening the side, talked about bringing in more power, maybe bringing in more experience, but we did lose quite a number of players. And before we go into the ones that left, I'll just mention the ones that came in. We'll just mention the ones that left. Ryan Williams went to Perth Glory. Joel Cooper obviously never really settled, and he left. Mark Sykes couldn't wait to get out the door, could he? Jamie Hansen probably stayed a season too long. Sam Winnell went to Burton. Anthony Ford went to Wrexham, and there were a few other youth team players that went out the door as well. But so we did lose like quite a few players then, but quite a few players that were fringe players that wasn't really the end of the world that we did get rid of. But it seemed to take a long time to bring anybody in.
Well, this, again, is probably the first sign of the problems of the fact that we would say, we're going to get our business done early this year. We're not going to sort of be one of these sides that are scratching around for players, come for the start of the season. We're going to get all our players in early. We're all going to be settled, and we're all going to be fit and running towards the start of the season, which is great in theory, but didn't actually pan out like that.
No, it didn't, and it meant that we went off on a pre-season tour to Spain with really no new signings in the door. So straight away you could see, and people were starting to raise alarm bells at this. Straight away you could see that there might be a lack of cohesion in the squad because you haven't had that full pre-season with a settled squad. And constant theme throughout it was that if you look back at the old interviews, is Robinson just saying, well, we've got one or two that are close. One's flying in as we speak, and he'd be saying stuff like, but we've had so many problems, you wouldn't believe the problems that we've had trying to sign people. Usual kind of like Robinson spin on things. Not the first time that we've heard it.
I always think like if you were like a credit controller, someone like you'd always speak to someone like Karl Robinson like 20 times a day. It's like, honestly, the check, I've posted it. It should be on to you. I'll bring it round in person. I honestly, I don't know what's happened to it.
So eventually the signings did come, and it started with Kieran Brown, which I think we can both agree was a good signing. But that signing only came in once Luke McNally went out the door, really. They sort of passed each other on the way out and way in. But Kieran Brown coming in was a good one. But then we had to wait quite a while before we got new players in. And this season started on the 30th of July last year. And this is when we signed these players. Kieran Brown, 1st of July. Stuart Finley was the next one in, 19th of July. Ed McGinty, backup keeper, 21st of July. Yannick Wildschut, 22nd of July. Josh Murphy, 26th of July. Jody Jones, 29th of July. And then when the season had already started, Javan Anderson came in on the 1st of December. So these signings came in very bloody late.
Those dates on that are shocking, aren't they?
Yeah.
That is literally, I mean, they were signed almost hours before the start of the season. But with Jody Jones, though, he was playing all pre-season. He was being with us for quite a while, and Karl couldn't make a decision. And I think it literally just turned out, well, we don't have everyone else, he'll do.
With the benefit of hindsight, it's so easy to look back at these decisions and just look at how many bad ones were made. And I always seem to just come back to like complacency for me. Like it just seems to be a common theme of like that Karl had done a great job with Oxford, but you almost feel that he felt that he was a little bit beyond sacking in a way. He got himself too deeply involved with everything. And I don't want to make that a joke about personal life or anything like that, but he got too he was too comfortable in his job is the way I'm trying to say it. And that sort of seems to be what it seems to have been, like almost a lazy approach to the signings. I'm sure it probably wasn't, but that's how it comes across. Throw in that as well, Jack Stevens went out on loan, who was our first choice goalkeeper for a lot of last season. he went out on loan to Port Vale, a side in the same league as us, which felt weird, especially as we brought in a goalie that wasn't ready to be first choice goalie in Ed McGinty.
The weird thing about our signings is, if you look at them, is that going back to what I said earlier, was the fact that there were flaws that needed to be addressed. We needed a central defensive midfield player. We needed some more resources in midfield. A lot of our signings cancel each other out. McGinty comes in, Stevens goes out. Sykes goes out, Wildschut comes in. Williams goes out, Murphy comes in. Ford goes out, Brown comes in. McNally, Finley, so all you're doing is replacing like with like.
Yeah.
Now you can argue about the respective qualities of the players we brought in over the ones that you replaced, but you would sort of say that's not addressing the faults. All you've done is just fill in the gaps. The issues that were there before the season haven't been looked at. So why did he think they were going to improve?
Yeah, and it was a smaller playing squad than what we had last year as well, and a lot of that went on the money that they spent on bringing in the likes of Yannick Wiltshire and Josh Murphy, who were the big marquee signings.
Yeah.
There's two guys on loan as well that I haven't touched on, and that was obviously Lewis Bate and Kyle Joseph, but they came in as well late. 4th of August for Lewis Bate, 11th of August for Kyle Joseph. I didn't even realise that Joseph wasn't here to start the season. I just completely forgotten that. I didn't realise he came in 2 or 3 games in, which again is just crazy. I mean, luckily he was one that really worked out. But look, we know that some of these players didn't work out, and that's an understatement. But what were your initial, if you can remember, what were your initial thoughts when we signed, other than Kieran Brown, who we knew about? Let's talk about the main ones, who I'm going to say are Findlay, Wildschut, Murphy, and Anderson.
Well, the trouble is, you send. Mostly, I try to be. You're positive when a new player joins the club. You don't know much about them really, and you're always positive. Oh, let's see what they're going to be like. Findlay, good record up in Scotland. We seem to be wanting him for a while. He seems to be a good, on paper, everything's shown like a good experienced centre half to come down over here. It all worked out, it all sounded good on paper. Josh Murphy, very experienced winger, had a couple of injury issues over the years, but by and large, a good, exciting player. Wildschut, again, I didn't know much about him, but the pre-season hype about him was that he was a good, experienced central, winger. He had a lot to bring to it, and you just sort of thinking, well, let's just see what these players can bring. You're gonna be willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, and if you look at it, the players they were replacing, Cooper, barely seen. Williams, decent player, but not you wouldn't say he was sort of irreplaceable. Mark Sykes. Yeah, a bit of a shame. I had a bit of a falling out and had a decent season with Oxford United. But you're thinking, these weren't players who were saying were like the linchpin of Oxford United, what our seasons are based on. You were replacing some players with some players you're thinking, well, they should surely be as good as the players, if not better, than the ones we got rid of. So that's what you're probably thinking at the time. But it sadly didn't work out like that.
No, it didn't work out like that, and it didn't help with the fact of Stuart Finley struggled to find his feet and still beat some people that aren't that impressed with him, and Wildschut and had a really horrific injury. To be fair to him, a really bad injury in pre-season.
That was just really bad luck, wasn't it? That's just...
Ripping a hamstring off the bone was really bad luck, and you could argue that he hasn't even really recovered fully from that.
No.
Josh Murphy was the risk, and they said that was a risk. Later on in the season, they highlighted him as being a risk with an injury record. And then you throw in, you add those to the squad. Jovan Anderson was a bit of a mixed bag. You didn't really know what to expect. It was nice that we signed a player from Lazio, but it was like, he never really, they didn't really, I don't think Karl really knew where to play him. And
Jody Jones.
Yeah, again, Jody
Jones. Why?
Jody Jones is.
Why did we sign him?
Jody Jones is the weirdest one, and that probably just epitomises the muddle that was this transfer window, and epitomises probably one of the key reasons of what went wrong this season. But there is another thing we didn't talk about, which a lot of people probably would have forgotten, and that was all through the preseason. It was pretty much assumed that Cameron Brannigan had kicked his last ball for Oxford United and that he wasn't going to feature again. And it was heavily featured that he was going to go to Blackpool. And I think the day before we played Derby, on the 30th of July, he even travelled up to Blackpool, which we all thought was going to be him signing. And then we get the news late that night that he's come back and he's signed a new 3-year deal with Oxford United. So that, at the very least, gave Oxford a huge boost going into the season, that they did keep one of their key prominent players.
If you take Robinson at his word, at the time when the news came out, he said he got a phone call from Brannigan, and he was fully expecting that to be a phone call of just saying, well, I've signed, thank you for all your help, and just a goodbye and, good, and all the best, and that's what he expected. And then he was completely taken aback to realise, actually, boss, I want to stay. Can I sign a new contract? Which, surely should have been a massive shot in the arm for us as a club. I mean, I am not Cameron Brannigan's biggest fan, I must admit. I've always, I like him as a player. I don't think he's as amazing as some people make him out to be. But surely someone coming in like that, declining the club, wanting to stay with Oxford United, wanting to show commitment to the club, and it's all just fallen flat.
This is a very tenuous link, and this is really.
Go on.
I couldn't believe how clutching at straws this is. This is really no evidence for this whatsoever, and you have to take this with a million grains of salt. But if you listen to James Constable's podcast, and I do recommend that you do, everybody out there if you haven't, it's very interesting, especially when he talks about the episode about how he nearly went to Swindon, and he didn't go to Swindon, but it was almost like the club wanted him to go, but then he didn't want to go, and the deal fell through, and his relationship with Chris Wilder was destroyed pretty much after that. He had a really, Wilder almost completely fell out with Bino after that one a lot, and obviously they still were professional and worked together, but the relationship between the two players fell out a lot. And I wonder if there was a little bit of that with Robinson and Brannigan, just the fact of thinking that this job is done, money coming into the club, maybe money to spend on some new players, and then all of a sudden that isn't the case, and you've got Brannigan back, and maybe that was a plan, that was part of the plan that Robinson hadn't bargained on.
To be honest, that sounds very plausible. I mean, if you think that you're going to be using Cameron Brannigan for, let's say, a 6-figure sum, a 7-figure sum, like you would expect to lose him for that, you must be thinking, well, I can get a couple of players in there, probably started to sort of do the groundwork on them, and then suddenly that's been taken away from you.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's tinfoil hat stuff, isn't it? We'll never know. But again, you did talk about how there were players that Robinson wanted and that didn't get over the line because we didn't have funding, or players went for better wages, and you wonder whether that would have been different if Brannigan would have gone. But I'm glad that he stayed, and I think that most fans were glad that he stayed. And that did give us a little bit of a boost going into the season. And that finally brings us on to the start of the season. That is segment number 2. So, Robert, let's have a look at the start of this season. I'm going to take it up to the first 13 games, which seems a bit of a weird number, but there is a reason for it. The first 13 games of the season, Oxford sat 19th in the table. We'll never finish that low, surely. Surely it'll pick up, won't it?
False position.
Yeah, 13 games. We were 19th. We just had a 2-1 defeat at home to Peterborough. Matty Taylor, red card and all that stuff. And we played 13, won 4, drawn 2, and lost 7 of the opening 13 games. There was a good cup win against Swansea on penalties. I'm not sure when the Crystal Palace game fit into this one. It might have been after it, but that was more than half the games lost already at this early stage of the season. And is there anything from that early point of the season that you want to bring up or want to talk about or want to touch on, or what your thoughts were at the early parts of the season?
If you look at the early part of the season, there are some shocking results over there. I mean, I was highlighted Morecambe at home 1-1. I mean, what the hell, And he's sort of like lose to Cheltenham. Then we get like a 5-0 win over Leyton Orient, which apparently was going to give us all a shot in the arm. But
that was Papa John's, though, wasn't it?
Yes, Papa John's, yeah. But then you got like losing to the McDonald's at home, beating Burton at home. It's just there's nothing there to sort of get your teeth into as well. It's just all very bitty, and that's my.
Who were the losses? Just read out the losses. I know Derby.
Yeah. Okay, Derby, Rovers, Lincoln. We're doing league, not doing cup, right?
Yeah, just do league.
Yeah. Plymouth. And then you're down to next loss is Wickham.
Yeah. And we lost to Peterborough as well, didn't we?
Yeah,
and a lot of those home games as well. And but I'm going to look at the first game of the season. It was a loss to Derby. It was a big banner game, big club coming down into League One. Went away to Derby, and for me, it was a game we lost 1-0. And I remember people at the end of this one being like, oh wow, we played quite well, that's a difficult place to go and we've not disgraced ourselves. And I remember being very annoyed. Even at that game, I remember being really pissed off that we'd lost that game. And it wasn't the fact of losing to Derby, that's fine, whatever. It was the fact that we'd done the same thing that we'd done last season. We play well at times. The first half, we largely dominated. We couldn't score. And then in the second half, we lost our composure. We went into what we hold mode. Stuart Findlay makes a mistake. He gives it to Lieutenant O'Hurahan, on the edge of the box. And we end up losing a game 1-0, which we really shouldn't have lost. And it's a game where all the Derby fans give us a pat on the head saying, well done, little Oxford. You're a good little side, you are. You really pushed us. And it's just like, how many times are we... I just don't... Like, we didn't learn any lessons, and it felt like that very early on in the very first game. There we go. I've been waiting to get that rant out. But then in the... And just on that Morecambe game as well, we'll get into the second game against Cambridge because that was a really lucky win, but that is remembered for something better than the lucky win. The Morecambe game, especially, that is a game where Oxford United had injury problems and Karl Robinson was really struggling to think who to play. But that is where I really just saw Oxford. Wow, this is a side that had so many flaws and so much trouble with an identity of how to play. That first half, Morecambe just literally put 10 men behind the ball, and all Oxford could do was just pass it along the back four and then just hit a long diagonal ball every now and again out to the wing. Morecambe would repel it and it would come back. It was so slow, it was so rubbish, and at that early stage of the season, you were looking at it and thinking, this is trouble. This is real trouble because we just haven't got the pace. We haven't got the creative spark that we'd had in recent seasons.
But I know you're going to mention the Cambridge match now. We could probably just look on that.
Yep.
But like I say, it's overshadowed by the fact of Tyler Goodrum, who we'll touch on in a second, scoring his first goal for the club. We did not deserve that win. That was lucky as hell.
No,
I mean, really Cambridge should have won that game.
Yep.
And then it's in the last minute, 17-year-old kid. I can't even remember. He's about 17, isn't he? Sort of.
Tell you what, Robert, you probably be whatever his age is. He makes you feel bloody old, doesn't he?
Yeah. He picks the ball up, dribbles in the box, scores a fantastic goal. Celebrates, going mad. Everyone's happy. And that completely overshadows what was actually a lucky win. And this is no disrespect to Tyler Goodrum, who frankly is one of the better things to have happened to us this season.
Yep.
But it was sort of like papering over the cracks a little.
Yeah, it did paper over the cracks, but there's also always that thing of thinking that, is that going to be the thing that just carries us forward now? You hear about that a lot in football, that play crap and win, sign of a good side. Is this just Oxford? Are we, if we're still picking up wins and picking up points while the side's gelling, that's, could be deemed as a positive thing as well. Also, the win against Swansea in the Cup, where we came back and got this fantastic win on penalties to set up again against Crystal Palace. These all felt like parts where you could build momentum on, and there were numerous games throughout that season that could be looked upon as like shoots of recovery and times where we might build a bit of momentum and start motoring up the league. But it just never happened. It never materialised. And the main thing is we look so bad going forward, but we still had the same defensive problems. We were still giving away really crap goals. And now we looked like we were really struggling to stick the ball in the net at the other end.
Well, that's what masked it last season. The fact is, last season we scored goals, and that completely sort of votes the fact is that even though we couldn't keep a clean sheet, the fact is generally we were winning most of these matches because we were able to score. Suddenly we were finding it incredibly difficult to score. I'm just flicking through these results here at the moment. You've got you have a good little spell here where there's suddenly Oxford beat Cheltenham, they beat Leighton Orient the Papa John's 5-0. Then they beat Burton. So you're thinking, oh, good, these are 3 wins on the bounce. And then we lose 1-0 to Plymouth, but Plymouth are a very, very good side.
Kyle Joseph missed a real sitter, but Plymouth did 1-0 flat at Oxford that day.
And then home games against the McDons, 2-1 defeat.
Yeah, and again, this was like going into September, and this was a time when Oxford's best player in September, if you can remember it, was John Messinio.
Yes, that's right. God almighty.
So this sort of shows you about, and again, Karl did have his bad luck with injuries. He did. But every side will point to that. Every side will point to times where they don't have their best players. And you have to kind of scratch around and do and hope that the backup players can come through and do the job. But that just kind of summed up Messinio, who you would have thought wouldn't have kicked a ball this season, and obviously did retiring and managing Portsmouth. You wouldn't know he'd end up being player of the month in September, but that showed you kind of how bad it was, and it was really bad. And there were some murmurings of discontent growing with every home defeat. It seemed to be a similar story of Oxford going down and then desperately trying to get back into the game, but not being able to do so. Inevitable 1-0 defeat at home to Wickham being a case in point for that. But then we did go on an unbeaten run, Robert, and that is part 3, the unbeaten run.
Right, so the next run of games, 1-1 draw with Portsmouth. Pretty standard, really, for playing Portsmouth.
Great goal by Kyle Joseph, my goal of the season.
And then, glory be, we go to the Wanderers, 3-1 victory.
Probably. And this is probably one of the only games of the season I didn't watch because I was at a wedding. Probably Oxford's best game of the season. Maybe those ones later on, but that was certainly the best result we'd had against one of the sides up around the top of the league. And 3 great goals by Oxford. Well, Steve Seddon just hit him and went in, but great goal by Kieran Brown in that 3-1 win.
That was then followed up by a 1-1 draw with Fleetwood. Mm-hmm. Another draw with Shrewsbury, and then an absolute stonking win over Port Vale, 4-0.
Yeah, Matty Taylor back in the goals, ironically, against Port Vale.
A win in the FA Cup against Woking, followed by 1-1 draw with Forest Green Rovers. Okay. And then another win, 4-1 in the FA Cup against Exeter.
Yeah, that was a good win against Exeter as well. I think the 2 games after that, the final 2 ones to round this off, are games that I definitely do want to talk about. Accrington Stanley and Sheffield Wednesday rounded off that with a 1-1 draw and a 0-0 draw. But Robert, just on that unbeaten run, which obviously was over talked about, as you would expect unbeaten runs usually are, a lot of draws.
A lot of draws. Just looking through it there, 1-1 Forest Green. I think you've got 1-1 Shrewsbury, 1-1 Fleetwood. You're thinking, this isn't anything to sort of they aren't terrible results in isolation, but you just feel like they're nothing to write home about. They're just bang average.
There was a lot of common theming in those ones as well around that time. Oxford were taking the lead in a lot of games and then being pegged back. Portsmouth, Shrewsbury, Accrington were all games where Oxford went 1-0 up and then.
Are these goals in the edge of the penalty area smashed in past Eastwood?
I think that I think one of them. Well, one of them. Actually, no, because Shrewsbury and Pompey, I think, were both headers, And to say Accrington's goal was edge of the penalty area is being incredibly generous to Oxford's defence and incredibly unfair to the Accrington player who absolutely levered it in from about 40 yards. But that game was just epitomised so much about Oxford's not laziness, but the lack of killer instinct that they had this season is the fact that we were so in control of that game. Accrington didn't look like they were going to score a goal. If they'd have played for another 2 or 3 hours, we looked so in control. We got a goal which nobody saw because the cameraman missed it, which eventually went in. And then just randomly, this guy just gets the ball, the defence don't close him down, and he just levers it into the bottom corner from 40 yards. It was such a deflating draw. So frustrating. But the game, a 0-0 draw against Sheffield Wednesday, was very encouraging. I remember I went to that. I did. I sat in the Sheffield Wednesday home end in the Cop because a guy from work gave me his ticket. And I remember it was a very promising Oxford United performance. A lot of it I was doing shouting behind muffling my voice behind a glove because Marcus Brown missed a couple of sitters. James Henry missed an open goal.
Yes.
And we played great. We played so well. We went to one of the guys that were top of the league and we matched them and arguably played them off their own field for large periods of it. But we couldn't get the win. But we did see 2 of these summer signings for the first time. And that was Yannick Wiltshire and that was Josh Murphy. Actually, I think Murphy did play earlier on in the season, but first time we'd seen them in a long, long time. Yeah. They both came on, and they both actually played quite well when they came on. And it was Josh Murphy who had the chance to be a bloody hero in this game. Right at the end of the game, Oxford have a penalty after Gatlin O'Donker goes down in the box. Josh Murphy misses the penalty. Sheffield Wednesday very nearly score straight from that. And you left the stadium with another kind of like feeling of, okay, well, we should have won the game, but we played quite well. Players are coming back. This might be good for the second half of the season.
But this is what we've been hearing up until this point. There's been like a little siren song in the background with like Karl Robinson.
Don't say it, because that brings us on to point number 4 of it, which is called Judge Me When My Players Are Back. That little nagging song that Karl Robinson was singing all season. You're free to tell us now. What was it?
It was just a little every now and again after, like, if the wind changed, you walk, go driving past the Kassam Stadium, you could just hear a, just wait until the players have returned. Judge me when my players are fit. Mm-hmm. And, well, spoiler alert, we did.
Yeah, well, you say that. You're putting that, you're downplaying that as like a little whispering in the wind. When we all know Karl Robinson was quite the opposite in terms of like going round fucking Oxford town centre with a megaphone.
Do you ever remember those clips of sort of like electioneering in like the 1970s? There'll be like someone driving a car with like a loudspeaker on the top with like a tinny voice going, it sort of feel like something like
Goldie Wilson.
Yeah, that's it. It's probably like you're like driving around the streets. Johnny Judge Me when Josh Murphy's back at the side. You have not seen how good Yannick Wiltshire truly is.
Re-elect Mayor Goldie Wilson. Progress is his middle name.
There was a fans forum with the board and with Karl Robinson just before that Sheffield Wednesday game, actually. And that was where he was quite, after the back of Oxford being unbeaten for a while, sat on that panel and he was very bullish. He felt very smug, very conceited, and he was very just like really pleased. He almost like couldn't wait to tell us that like Murphy and Wiltshire were back training again. But there was also, remember Baldock, he was also another one that was like never back fit and always like when's he back, but he was really bullish about that and he did get them back. But so everything kind of thought, great, right, we finally got those players back. We're in the middle of the table, and can we have a good second half to this season and really kick on and try and get this promotion bid back on track? Because don't forget, that was the aim before the start of the season. Promotion, either through the playoffs or automatic.
And Ian did it.
Section 5, Robert, is called Christmas, New Year, Fog, and Match Fixing.
I want to say something about the cup game. If so,
well, we'll get to it.
Yeah,
we'll get to it. There was a pocket of games over this period, and it started with Oxford United's undefeated champions, led by Karl Robinson, with the likes of Waldschut and the likes of Murphy, going to Ipswich Town on Boxing Day. And my goodness, to say that we got our pants pulled down and got a thoroughly good smacking is probably an understatement to Ipswich. They destroyed us by 3-0. Oxford were lucky to get nil, absolutely killed. But then we did back that up with a very good 3-1 win over Charlton.
Yeah.
Again, it was a very typical performance of not taking our chances. We nearly buggered it up, but we did get over the line. But in that game, Robert, Josh Murphy actually played really well. He set up a goal for Billy Bowden, and it was all very encouraging. And I believe Karl had a rather understated opinion about Murphy after that game, if you can remember.
Yes, I actually went to that game, and I remember seeing Murphy set up that first goal, and it was like just a really good cross, big finish by Bowden at the back post, and you're thinking, oh, good. If this is what he's going to do, this could be very promising in the new year. And after the match, did Karl Robinson say one of two things? Did he either say it's going to be good to see the lad back? None of you have seen what he's like when he's fully fit. I'm very excited to see how he's performed, and I can't wait to see him. Or did he basically say, this guy is the greatest player who's ever played in his entire life and will be the greatest player in League One? Paraphrasing.
Yeah, I kind of, unfortunately, he said the latter of those two comments, and Robert hasn't really elaborated too much on that. That's pretty much what he said. But so that was all,
and this damaged Murphy, because we're now suddenly expecting someone who's a great player at this level, and his performances over the next sort of like few months are nowhere near that. And he never said that. If he come out and like just said, oh, he's a great promising player, you haven't seen the best of him yet, he's not fully fit, but I'm really hoping in the next few weeks we'll really start to see more of that, that would have been fine. That's all that needed to be said. But no, we had to go and get Maradona's, more talented younger brother to play for us.
I mean, that's Karl, though, isn't it? I mean, Karl's the cheerleader, isn't he? Karl Robinson was always the loud trumpeter, banging the drum for him and his players and all that stuff. And that was his way of probably thinking that he can motivate Murphy by sending a message to Murphy, thinking that he's the best player in League One. I mean, unfortunately, it didn't quite see it like that. But that was the final game of 2022, and it was a year at the time I was quite glad to see the back of, because Oxford hadn't been very good. But after we saw 2023, yeah, I wasn't, maybe I was a bit hasty with 2022, but it started on New Year's Day, a game I watched in North Macedonia on my phone, and visiting the in-laws. And I tell you what, it was as frustrating as any home defeat we'd had all season. It was actually that game which literally made me think, I don't think we're going to do that. That's it. We're not doing anything this year. We're going to be, at that time, I'm thinking we're going to be mid-table, nothing more, nothing less. It was a game we completely dominated it. Absolutely should have been a couple of goals up at least at half-time. Exeter, second half, counter-attack on us, where they ended up having 4-on-1 on the break.
Oh, yeah, that match.
And they score, and it's a 1-0 defeat. And, that is just a real shocker, a real terrible one. And then a few days later, what made that worse for me, in a way, is Oxford played Arsenal after that in the FA Cup. And I know you want to talk about this game. Oxford played Arsenal in the FA Cup, and I almost felt like the players don't deserve to play Arsenal. We don't deserve to be playing them. It's like kind of you haven't deserved this kind of like game where everybody comes and cheers you for being brave. or anything like that. So, but we did. We played Arsenal. We held them for 60 minutes. It ended up being a 3-0 defeat, the Eddie Nketiah show, if you like. But you sounds like you have got things to say about this one, Robert.
This was the match. I felt so patronised watching this on TV. It was just such a patronising experience listening to them talking about. We could just do anything. We put a block in and it goes out for a throw in, and suddenly you've got that tit Sam Matterface go, "We're in a cup tie now, ladies and gentlemen." So it's just a block, Sam. It's all, it's what happens. These are professional football players. And it's like any little thing we can do. It was like we're sort of like a non-league side who sort of rocked up. You sort of like they just seem to be so pathetically grateful that we could put one foot in front of the other. We didn't create any chances.
No.
Do you remember playing Man City when they came down over there? Matty Taylor bursting through, scoring a goal. We lost the match because they're a much better side than we are, and so were Arsenal. But we didn't create anything.
No.
The only chance we had was it's just at one point, Matt Taylor got the wrong side of his defender. And Matt Taylor of a couple of years ago might have been charging in on goal there. This Matt Taylor losing control of the ball and he just gently rolls the keeper.
I'm doing Matt hand gesture because you did point that out in the video we did earlier on in the season. That was exactly what you said, actually, that you just feel that Taylor's lost a step, and a few years ago he would have got to that ball and either scored it or won a penalty or something like that. It was. I mean, there was some periods where Oxford did well and they pressed Arsenal and they won the ball back off them high, but the usual trouble with not being able to score goals. But I will just say, in defence of Matterface and Lee Dixon and all that lot, they probably say it for every cup tie, and we only noticed it because Oxford were involved. But they probably do that for every single lower league. So it's probably just on the script. You have to mention these things to try and bring some interest into it from a neutral point of view. But look, nice day for Oxford United. TV game, big full house. We got to beat the drum a little bit about the need for the new stadium, which was also good publicity for that. But moving past that game were two very weird games in the season. And before we get to it, we will just touch on the Kieran Brown situation, because after that game, things were bad. Things were really, really like not good for Oxford, were they? And there was a lot of things that were discontent growing in the club and a lot of apathy and stuff like that going around the fans. And this story came out linking Kieran Brown to match fixing, saying that he picked up a deliberate yellow card where he fouled Saka, and his mate had told everyone that he's going to get booked tonight and stuff like that. And it just created this real negative PR, really, didn't it? It was easy to kind of think that there might be some truth in it too.
Well, I think I said at the time that I did a video. I said you'd have to be bloody stupid to do it.
Yeah.
But people do bloody stupid things.
Yeah.
I mean,
look at Ivan Toney.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, I do feel sorry for Kieran Brown now, because he did it's sort of like a few days ago, actually, he came out and said there's no further case to action. So that's been sort of hanging over him now. And looking back, you think it just seems very weird. You think that a League One defender might get a booking up against an England winger.
And it was also, and I think testament to Kieran Brown. The fact that he never let that interfere with his football, and I think everybody unanimously voted that he was the player of the year, and he never let that stand in the way or anything like that, and he just continued to be the solid player that he's been over the course of the year. And weirdly, the next game that Oxford played was Fleetwood Town away, and it was probably one of the luckiest wins we'd had of the season. Fleetwood absolutely battered us in the first half. Simon Eastwood did a usual job of making about 6 or 7 great saves, and then he lets one in that he should save. So it comes away with it. Everyone said, Eastwood's crap. Poor old Eastie. But it was a goal that he really should have saved. But he did keep us in it for the large part. But then Oxford United find a way to win this game at a game against Fleetwood, where we normally lose away to Fleetwood. It's usually a pretty crappy hunting ground for us. 1-0 down, playing like crap. Karl Robinson, give care to him, throws on Kyle Joseph. Within seconds, Kyle Joseph changes the game with a brilliant individual goal. Oxford, last minute of the game, actually get a goal from a set piece, and it was Kieran Brown who scored the winner in the last minute. With it was almost like you couldn't make up the script with all that hanging over it. So great win there. The next game after that, we played Ipswich at home, who just battered us on Christmas Eve. But this was a day where Oxford did get their revenge on the Tractor Boys, and Oxford did get a 2-1 win. But I think that was just a cut and dry win, right, Roy? There was no controversy about it at all, was there?
Well, I don't know, Ian. I don't think anyone actually physically saw the game. There was just like a complete veil of fog down for the entire match. I mean, it's one of those ones where, like, you look at some foggy games and you think, well, it's not too bad. You look at that one, you're thinking, okay, if that had been any earlier, they really should have stopped that match.
It was very odd because it really rolled in phases, and there was times where it was looking okay, and there was some times where it was really bad. From a viewing point of view, it was really bad. I know referees have a different way of judging it. Like, if you're on the halfway line, as long as you can see one of the goals, it's fine. But it was a really tough game to see the ball, like watching it on iFollow. There was some times where I just didn't know what was happening. But Yannick Wilshire scored a goal for Oxford in this game, and it was actually one of the very Yannick goal. Not that that's the only one he scored, but just bulldozed his way through and scored it. Ipswich came back and equalised, and then fog really kind of just made it anyone's game, really. But then it was Cameron Brannigan, edge of the box, steps up, slams in the winner. Oxford get back-to-back 2-1 wins. Yes, it was fortuitous, both of those wins, really. But suddenly it put us in a position where we were 10th in the league, 35 points. This is the 21st of January. Remember these things. 21st of January, we were 10th in the league, 35 points, 8 points off the playoffs. Suddenly, you have that thought in your mind of saying, if we pick up the pace now, get some transfers in, make some inroads, and get a good little end to the season, we could end up galloping into the playoffs. And we'll end this video by saying this. Thank you for watching part 1. And that win over beating Ipswich on the 21st of January. Remember this. Ipswich didn't lose a single game after this point in League One. Can you say the same about Oxford? You will find out in part 2 of this video. There's no spoilers from me. And I just want to say thank you very much for watching. If you can hit like and subscribe, that's absolutely great. And we will be back to round off the second part of this season.